What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy here, live from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center after we just finished up with Ryan Day and, well, just Ryan Day today, ahead of the Penn State game. Dave Biddle, unable to join us. He had some car issues before coming over here, so hope everything's going fine with Dave. Sounds like it's fine. He was able to watch home. So you just get me, Patrick Murphy from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. So it's Penn State week, and it's not the Penn State week everyone thought it would be at the beginning of the season. We'll get to that in a minute. But sort of the headliner, I think, coming out of Ryan Day's press conference was the talk about Jim Knowles, Ohio State's former defensive coordinator, who helped the Buckeyes win a national championship last season and is now at Penn State. And then Matt Patricia, who is the current Buckeye defensive coordinator, who was trying to help the Buckeyes win a national championship this season. Ryan Day was asked about both of these guys, and I assume you can imagine why. That at his press conference today, he made it, I won't say clear, but he was asked about, when was the last time, or when did you know about Jim Knowles potentially leaving the program? He did not answer that part of the question, which I thought was interesting. Sometimes it's more interesting what isn't said than what is said. But he did mention that there has not been much, if any, communication since Jim Knowles departed for Penn State. He did talk pretty positively about what Jim Knowles did in his time at Ohio State and the success that defense had, but also what Matt Patricia has done. Now, he was quick to say, we haven't done anything yet. One thing he did bring up with Matt Patricia in that sort of vein is that Matt Patricia's been through these long hauls of a season, right? And Ryan said, it's going to be the start of November. This is when the season really gets going, and Matt Patricia knows that as well as anyone. And I think we can compare this defense to last year's defense or the last 3 years' defense at Ohio State. Um, Both, I think, are very good defensive coordinators. Obviously, Jim Knowles has not had the success he hoped for at Penn State, but I do think that there is something that Matt Patricia has brought to this program on how you go about winning over the course of a long season. Obviously, the Buckeyes went through this last year as they went on to win a national championship, but a lot of those guys are gone, right? There's only a handful of guys that really went through the full grind. And by that I mean not only, going each week, but also playing in these games and stuff like that. So Matt Patricia really knows how to handle that. So it's just another guy who's been through it, and he's been through it multiple times. He's won Super Bowls and then had to come back the next year and sort of build back up to all of that. And so if you're comparing Jim Knowles and Matt Patricia, which will be done, I imagine, throughout this week, I imagine it will come up on the broadcast on Saturday. I think that's one thing in the Matt Patricia sort of checklist that you get from him is just that experience of going through NFL seasons and making Super Bowl runs, these long runs, and kind of how you balance that out. I've talked before about, Matt Patricia's dealt with the professionalization of the NFL, right? He knows how to balance sort of the players in the locker room making different money, stuff like that. That's new to college football. That's another thing for him. But on the field, I don't think you can argue with the success that Ohio State has had. Ryan Day talked about sort of looking at Nick Saban's success at Alabama and how he went about hiring his assistant coaches. Hi, Tim. The legendary Tim May there. How he went about hiring his assistant coaches when they were having success and getting, poached almost every offseason, and talked about the time he took and acknowledged people were probably looking at Ohio State and saying, when are they going to make a defensive coordinator hire? But he wanted to make sure he got the right guy. And that's not just a guy whose X's and O's make sense or that fit with the scheme, but also fits within this group of coaches. And that's another thing that he really highlighted when talking about Matt Patricia was the staff and the continuity, and having a guy that can come in and work with that group. If you've seen Matt Patricia, if you've been at games or whatever, interacting, there's clearly a relationship built, not only with the players, which is obviously important, but also this coaching staff and how well they work together. And Matt Patricia's done a great job of fitting into that group because everybody came back, right? It was only Jim Knowles that left. So the fact that he was able to find a guy who not only could do some things schematically, maybe give you some advantages you didn't have before, take advantage of your players, but also he was a guy who, despite having this reputation as maybe being sort of gruff and whatnot for whatever reason, turned out to actually be a guy who could come in and work within the framework of this group and fit right in pretty seamlessly as we've seen thus far. Again, Ryan Day pointed out the season's not over; they have a ways to go, but through 7 games, 2 off weeks. They're the best defense in the country. So I think that's really important. And then he was asked a decent amount about assistant coaches in general. And like I said, other than the 2 coordinators and your offensive line coach from a year ago, you keep everybody on staff. And right now, with so many head coaching positions open, there is talk about this Ohio State staff. And obviously, Brian Hartline's name has come up mostly in connection with the Penn State job. We'll see if anything comes from that. But, you're in the middle of a season trying to deal with this. It's sort of the Jim Knowles situation, obviously, later in the season last year when he was talking to programs during the Buckeyes run to the national championship. Now it all works out. You win the national championship. And I don't think anyone is disappointed with how that went necessarily. But Ryan Day said, as I think I said before, there hasn't been communication since then. It's not like this was a happy breakup. It sounds like that's me reading between the lines a little bit. But I think you probably knew that if you just watched the way things played out. Jim Knowles not at the national championship celebration at Ohio Stadium, all of that stuff. Obviously going to another Big Ten school that you're going to play and compete with for a national championship, all that plays a part. But right now, Ryan Day is having to go through that if you believe the reports out there. I know there's been various levels of reporting on the interest Penn State has in Brian Hartline. It sounds like there is at least some interest. How far that has gone, what conversations have been had, all of that. I think we'll wait to find out. But it is an interesting time. If Brian Hartline is talking at all with Penn State about this head coaching opening, right before he plays Penn State, that's a weird dynamic. And Ryan Day said basically, it's this ever-changing world of college football where this is one of the things, the money, the opportunity to go be a head coach at a place like Penn State is for a lot of people at least too good to pass up. I think Ohio State does a good job of retaining their coaches, as I've mentioned before. So certainly they will want to keep Brian Hartline as far as I understand it. And whether Brian Hartline's interest in the Penn State job or the Penn State brass over there interest in Brian Hartline, how legitimate all of that is, we don't know. We can only speculate and whatnot. But it is just an interesting time to have that sort of going on, even if some of it is overdone. I just think you're about to play this team that you are going to coordinate an offense against that you have been linked with, and some reports you've spoke with and interviewed and all that. So just another strange time in the world of college football that we all love and live in. But as for Penn State, Ryan Day talked about this still being a matchup game, and I was wondering coming into the press conference today how he was going to approach this. Obviously, he said it every game this year about just the importance of taking this opponent seriously. He said Illinois was in his mind a top 10 program. He had to throw out the loss to Indiana. He talked very glowingly about Washington and going out there. Talked about Wisconsin and that being a really good defense if you turn on the tape and watch it, that they hadn't been put in great situations all the time. So I figured he would prop up Penn State, for lack of a better term, and he did just that. I think there is some validity to what he said. He said, other than the quarterback, Drew Aller, who obviously is out for the rest of the season, this is the same Penn State team, talent-wise, personnel-wise. James Franklin obviously is gone as well, but the same Penn State team that was number 2 in the country coming into the season. Now, were they overhyped? I don't know. I think no one in their wildest dreams expected Penn State to coming out of that Oregon loss, that double overtime Oregon loss. Let's remember that they were in double overtime and, one interception away from winning that game. And to then go on and lose the next 3 games and fire James Franklin and all that. So, Ryan Day said this message has already been communicated to the players that they can't take this team lightly just because they've lost 4 in a row and fired their coach and don't have their quarterback. And I think that's the mentality you absolutely have to take this weekend because, and I said it last week, I think that Penn State can come into the Horseshoe and make this more of a game than people would like, Buckeye fans would like, people expect, if Ohio State doesn't have the same focus it's had every week on this game and take Penn State as seriously as they would if they were the number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever team in the country. Because there is still that talent, as Ryan Day said. But also, this is going to be the biggest game for Penn State. I was on a podcast with some Penn State people yesterday, and I talked about that 2011 Ohio State Wisconsin game when obviously that was on the road for Wisconsin, but Wisconsin comes in highly ranked, and Ohio State knocks them off that Hail Mary from Braxton Miller to Devin Smith. You talk to Buckeye fans about the 2011 season, a rough season, no doubt, but that's a memory that stands out. Not just to Buckeye fans, but players, coaches that were involved in that team, that program. So this is that opportunity for Penn State, right? To come into Ohio Stadium, to hand Ohio State, the defending national champions, their first loss, the number 1 team in the country, and they will view it as, essentially their Super Bowl, right? And Ohio State can't allow that to be, the thing that keeps Penn State in the game, the thing that maybe keeps Penn State upset. Now, I don't on upset alert, keeps Ohio State on upset alert, I guess I should say. Now, I don't believe that Ohio State is on upset alert, but the approach has to be right. And it wouldn't surprise me if this game is closer, and we'll obviously get into that later in the week than people expect. But the one thing that I think Buckeye fans should have confidence, and this was my question to Ryan Day, was about every week this year, there has been an opportunity for Ohio State to take it easy, to let down, maybe except for week 1 against Texas. But because you're the defending national champions, you came in as a top 3 team. Now you're the number 1 team in the country, especially after you beat Texas. Like there is a very clear alternate reality where this team starts to feel itself a little bit and has a letdown. And the closest thing the Buckeyes have had to a letdown was 2 weeks ago in Wisconsin, when I don't think they played their best game, but they still won 34-0. So this team has handled every mental hurdle that has come its way, which I think is really impressive. Now, some of that has to do with the coaching and the messaging and all that. Some of that has to do with so many new players who really want to prove themselves. There are reasons for it that you could have pointed to even in the preseason, but going out and doing it, going out and having that approach and that day-to-day, it's not just on Saturdays, right? And Ryan Day talks about this and talked about today. It's not just on Saturdays when you go take the field. Like, you've got to do it, have that everyday mentality, and you can't get bored or anything with that approach every week of doing the same things that have made you successful. And I think you look at a lot of teams coming off of a championship in any sport at any level, and it's just so easy to you made it to the mountain, right? You climbed all the way up there. You did all the hard work. And even if you weren't a starter, you were part of that team, right? And now you've got to go do it again. And all you're hearing about is how great you are, especially if you're having another good season and all that. And so it would just be so easy for a letdown. And they have not done that. And I think that's a credit to Ryan Day. I think that's a credit to the leaders on this team, the staff, all of them. And so that's why I think on Saturday, even if Penn State is able to keep it close, just because they have like for like talent, that's what Ryan Day said. It's another matchup game, regardless of the rankings. I do think Ohio State's approach every week has been key to this team's success and will be key, not only this game, but going forward, the rest of these games, because you're going to have opportunities after this game for other letdowns. You play at Purdue. You've got Rutgers and UCLA. And I know UCLA was playing better, but they just got beat pretty handily this past weekend. And then obviously the big one at Michigan. So there would be more opportunities for a letdown, so to speak. And then the final thing that I'll highlight here from Ryan Day's press conference that I think made some news is he was asked about Josh Padilla. And I've had a lot of people ask me over the last week because of some comments Ryan Day's made. And obviously the way Josh Padilla has rotated in with Tegra Shabola, do you think they'll make a change at right guard? I didn't think so. I thought that maybe you see Padilla play more, but that Tegra was a guy who they see enough in that he started all of last season through the national championship and has started all this season. held off Ethan Onianwa when at the beginning of the year when they were sort of rotating those two, and has thus far held off Josh Padilla. Ryan Day said that Josh Padilla has impressed in practice, impressed when he's gotten opportunities in the game. He called him, certainly the sixth man of that offensive line who can step in. And we've seen guys in that role before that have been very important. And they'll evaluate things throughout this week. It sounds to me like you will see Tegra Shabola start the game on Saturday. And maybe it's more of a split like we saw during the college football playoff. But I still think they're going to lean into Tegra, and like it or not, right or wrong, that seems to be the approach. I also think it's worth pointing out Josh Padilla has been different, and there's been some good things. He has not been perfect when he's been in games. This is an undersized guy when compared to the guards that Ohio State has. So he has to do some things differently, and I would say it's been better than some of the times Tegra's been in there. But there's also been some good play from Tegra, which I think gets overlooked by some of the bad as well. So I guess you have to trust what these coaches are seeing every day here in this building when the Buckeyes are practicing. It's hard to argue with the results. I know the offensive line hasn't been great and the right side has been an issue at times, but you're undefeated. You're the number one team in the country and you're coming off a national championship. So I think until proven otherwise, we have to trust in this group of coaches to make the right call and the decisions with a guy like Tegra and Josh Padilla. But it does sound like you could see more of Padilla in a bigger rotational role potentially going forward. All right, we're going to wrap it up. I got to get home, got to get some work done today. If you didn't hear or see the Ryan Day press conference, Steve Hellwagon is posting that on our YouTube page as we speak, and it will be up on Bucknuts shortly this afternoon. So thank you guys for tuning in to another Bucknuts instant reaction here from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Again, I'm Patrick Murphy, Bucknuts at 24/7 Sports. See you guys later this week.